On trial on Capitol Hill, the president's Iran policy.
You can't even tell the Congress, let alone the leaders of other countries, what's going on.
Good afternoon. Since the outset of the controversy over our policy relating to Iran, I've done everything in my power to make all the facts concerning this matter known to the American people.
Once more, a political drama is unfolding in Washington. In the months to come, as Congress investigates the Iran arms scandal, we will follow, in numbing detail, a trail of arms and money from the White House to Tehran.
The Reagan Administration's secret illicit arms trade with Iran to fund the Contras in Nicaragua from 1985 to 1987 was a serious presidential scandal in U.S. history. This proved the need for transparency in a government's affair, as citizens must fulfill their citizenship duties. In July 1979, the Sandinistas, a Marxist organization, took power and led the government of Nicaragua. With the Soviet Union and communism being a threat to the USA and Reagan's administration, Reagan used anti-communistic ideals to intrude on the Marxist influence. The U.S. government, specifically the Reagan administration, started to support the Contra rebels in Nicaragua. The Contra rebels were known to be the armed opponents in the regime of Sandinista. This started in December 1981 and went on from there for almost a decade. In addition to this, the Soviet Union allied with revolutionary governments rather than with the United States. The U.S. administration tried to make means with Iran, but ended up being much more negatively during the Cold War from 1985 to 1987. The Reagan administration secretly undertook an illicit arms trade with a terrorist group in Lebanon backed by Iran for this.
For 18 months now, we have had underway a secret diplomatic initiative to Iran. That initiative was undertaken for the simplest and best of reasons: to renew a relationship with the nation of Iran, to bring an honorable end to the bloody 6-year war between Iran and Iraq, to eliminate state-sponsored terrorism and subversion, and to effect the safe return of all hostages.
Despite the fact that numerous members of Reagan's administration opposed the initiative to sell the armed weapon to Iran, McFarlane, National Security Advisor, argued that the transaction would not only assist in national relations with Lebanon, but will also help those hostages who were held captive.
Without Iran's cooperation, we cannot bring an end to the Persian Gulf War. Without Iran's concurrence, there can be no enduring peace in the Middle East.
However, this operation was taken to fund the Contras in Nicaragua, who were battling the communist group. Despite it violating the Bola Amendment, the relationship between Iran is in the U.S.'s national interest.
But why, you might ask, is any relationship with Iran important to the United States? Iran encompasses some of the most critical geography in the world. It lies between the Soviet Union and access to the warm waters of the Indian Ocean. Geography explains why the Soviet Union has sent an army into Afghanistan to dominate that country, and if they could, Iran and Pakistan. Iran's geography gives it a critical position from which adversaries could interfere with oil flows from the Arab states that border the Persian Gulf. Apart from geography, Iran's oil deposits are important to the long-term health of the world economy. For these reasons, it is in our national interest to watch for changes within Iran that might offer hope for an improved relationship.
The Boland Amendment limited the CIA and DoD from funding and supporting foreign conflicts. This also restricted them from funding the anti-communist Contras in Nicaragua. The Boland Amendment was drafted so that they can bar the use of funds specifically to get rid of the Nicaraguan government. Later, a second Boland Amendment was signed so that no funds could be used against the government in Nicaragua.
The U.S. received a total revenue of $30 million USD from selling weapons to Iran. An investigation was launched and only 12 out of the 30 million was accounted for, which means that the 18 million that was unaccounted for was sent to the Contras in Nicaragua.
The charge has been made that the United States has shipped weapons to Iran as ransom payment for the release of American hostages in Lebanon, that the United States undercut its allies and secretly violated American policy against trafficking with terrorists. Those charges are utterly false. The United States has not made concessions to those who hold our people captive in Lebanon, and we will not. The United States has not swapped boatloads of plane loads of American weapons for the return of American hostages, and we will not. Other reports have surfaced alleging U.S. involvement. Reports of a sea lift to Iran using Danish ships to carry American arms, of vessels in Spanish ports being employed in secret U.S. arms shipments, of Italian ports being used, of the U.S. spending or sending spare parts and weapons for combat aircraft. All these reports are quite exciting, but as far as we're concerned, not one of them is true.
The CIA funded the Contras rebel, knowing that they were supposed to abide by the law. This was due to a presidential decision, so this was how the Contras were fully equipped with weapons and armors, all funded by the CIA. Oliver North came forward and assumed that Ronald Reagan was aware, since the National Security Advisor was fully aware of it.
Throughout the conduct of my entire tenure at the National Security Council, I assumed that the President was aware of what I was doing and had, through my superiors, approved it. I sought approval of my superiors for every one of my actions, and it is well documented. I assumed, when I had approval to proceed from either Judge Clark, Bud McFarlane, or Admiral Poindexter, that they had indeed solicited and obtained the approval of the President. I asked Admiral Poindexter directly, does the President know? He told me he did not.
If it wasn't for Attorney General Edwin Meese III and his investigation, the government officials might have gone away with the illegal activity, and it could have gone on for longer than it had. Millions of dollars were lost so that the public wouldn't have to know about the illegal activity and operations that the President and his administration were doing. When the operations that were running behind the public's eyes were finally known and leaked, impeachment was an option for him. They wanted Reagan to be out of the office for the lies that he told the public and press. His presidential name and ranking were to be revoked, but after the scandal was less talked about, his name was saved once again. Supporters of the law and the public were not in favor of what the government was exchanging with the terrorist group of Iran. They thought that if the U.S. stopped funding the Contras, the Soviets might have a chance to grasp power in Central America. Although the President and his administration and other figures supported the Contras, the government's ethics and their form of transparency and lack of understanding of their people overall is an ongoing issue, especially throughout history. It goes along the lines of the high-ranking officials' duties and their lies to the public. Ronald Reagan finally admits it was a mistake for doing an illicit arms trade with Iran. Many high-ranked officials were found guilty. This includes 4 IA officers, 5 government contractors, John Poindexter, the Deputy National Security Advisor, and National Security Advisor during the Reagan Administration, and Oliver North, but he was proven innocent later. As for Reagan, he was not found guilty since he only admitted to being responsible for the arms for hostages transaction, but claimed that he had no knowledge of the diversion.
In conclusion, the so-called private affairs of the government's secret illicit arms trade with Iran to fund the Contras were kept hidden away from the public. It was what caused the downfall of Ronald Reagan's presidency title, as he later left his office. The scandal generally caused widespread backlash and criticism from the public and citizens. It should not be a reminder to the government of how important it is to be honest and clear with the people. Overall, President Ronald Reagan admits that he regrets it.